The Pacific War was a brutal conflict, marked by intense and relentless fighting. It was a theater of war that tested the limits of human endurance and military strategy. It raged across vast distances, spanning thousands of miles of ocean and countless islands. The geography of the Pacific presented unique challenges that shaped the course of the war. From 1941, the forces of Imperial Japan clashed with the Allies in a series of fierce battles. The Japanese aimed to expand their empire while the Allies sought to halt their advance and reclaim lost territories. The United States bore the brunt of the fighting, committing vast resources and manpower to the Pacific Campaign. American soldiers faced grueling conditions, from dense jungles to treacherous beaches. Each island campaign brought its own horrors, with brutal hand-to-hand combat and devastating artillery barrages. The battles of Guadalcanal, Iwo Jima, and Saipan are etched into history for their intensity and high casualties, but none match the sheer ferocity of the Battle of Okinawa. This battle was a turning point, showcasing the desperation and determination of both sides. This battle, fought from April to June 1945, was the last major battle of World War II. It involved massive amphibious assaults, relentless air raids, and fierce ground combat. It was a clash of ideologies and military might, with the Allies seeking to bring an end to Japanese expansionism and the Japanese fighting to defend their homeland. The outcome would have profound implications for the future of the Pacific. The heavy casualties and destruction underscored the devastating cost of war and set the stage for the eventual surrender of Japan, reshaping the geopolitical landscape of the region. Okinawa, a small island in the Ryukyu chain, held immense strategic importance. For the Allies, it represented a critical staging ground. From Okinawa, bombers could easily strike the Japanese mainland. This would cripple Japan's war industry. It could force a surrender. For Japan, Okinawa was the last bastion of defense. Losing it would be a psychological blow. It would leave the home islands vulnerable to invasion. Both sides understood the stakes. They committed massive resources to the fight. On Easter Sunday, April 1, 1945, the Allied invasion force descended upon Okinawa. The U.S. 10th Army, under the command of General Simon Bolivar Buckner Jr., spearheaded the assault. Thousands of ships filled the horizon. Troops waded ashore under clear skies. The initial landings faced surprisingly light resistance. Japanese commanders had opted for a defense in depth. They would make their stand inland. This lull proved deceptive. It was merely the prelude to a storm. The Japanese 32nd Army, commanded by General Mitsuru Ushijima, was dug in. They were prepared for a fight to the death. Their strategy relied on a network of heavily fortified positions. Caves, tunnels, and bunkers riddled the landscape. The Japanese fought with incredible tenacity. They were determined to inflict maximum casualties. Their resistance was fierce and often fanatical. They embraced the Bushido Code. This samurai tradition emphasized death before dishonor. Section 5. American Firepower, a Grim Advantage. The Americans possessed overwhelming firepower. They unleashed a relentless barrage of artillery, naval gunfire, and airstrikes. The sheer volume of ordnance was staggering. The landscape was transformed into a moonscape of craters and debris. Yet the Japanese defenses proved remarkably resilient. The terrain favored the defenders. The Americans were forced into costly frontal assaults. Every inch of ground was contested. Casualties mounted on both sides. Section 6. The Battle for the Shuri Line, a stalemate. The fighting reached its peak in the Battle for the Shuri Line. This heavily fortified defensive network stretched across southern Okinawa. The Japanese had constructed interlocking trenches and bunkers. They were supported by artillery and machine guns. The Americans and their allies fought with courage and determination. But they faced a determined enemy. The battle for Shuri Line raged for weeks. It became a brutal war of attrition. Gains were measured in yards, casualties in thousands. Section 7. Kamikaze Attacks, Terror from the Sky. The Battle of Okinawa witnessed a terrifying new tactic, kamikaze attacks. These were suicide attacks by Japanese pilots. They would crash their planes, laden with explosives, into Allied ships. The kamikazes inflicted heavy losses on the Allied fleet. They sank dozens of ships and damaged hundreds more. The psychological impact was significant. The kamikazes represented the desperation of the Japanese defense. They foreshadowed the fanaticism the Allies might face in a mainland invasion. Section 8. Civilian Suffering, a Forgotten Tragedy. The Battle of Okinawa exacted a horrific toll on the island's civilian population. The battle, which lasted from April to June 1945, was one of the bloodiest in the Pacific theater. It wasn't just the soldiers who suffered, the civilians bore a significant brunt of the violence and chaos. Caught in the crossfire, Okinawan civilians faced unimaginable hardship. Families were torn apart, homes were destroyed, and the constant threat of death loomed over everyone. The island, once a peaceful home, became a battlefield where survival was uncertain. They were subjected to relentless shelling, bombing, and crossfire. The skies rained destruction, and the ground shook with the force of explosions. There was no safe place, no refuge from the onslaught. Food and shelter were scarce. With supply lines cut off and infrastructure destroyed, basic necessities became luxuries. People scavenged for whatever they could find, often risking their lives for a morsel of food or a place to sleep. Tragically, many Okinawans were driven to suicide by Japanese propaganda. The fear instilled by the Japanese military was profound. They were told that capture by the Americans meant torture and death, a fate worse than dying by their own hands. They were told that capture by the Americans meant torture and death. This propaganda was so effective that entire families chose to end their lives rather than face what they believed was inevitable suffering at the hands of the enemy. The true scale of civilian suffering remains a matter of debate. While the exact numbers are uncertain, the stories and memories of those who lived through it paint a picture of widespread and profound suffering. But estimates suggest that upwards of 100,000 Okinawan civilians perished during the battle. This staggering loss of life is a somber reminder of the war's devastating impact on innocent lives, a tragedy that should never be forgotten. Section 9. The Loss of General Buckner, a Blow to Morale. On June 18, 1945, tragedy struck the American command. General Buckner, the architect of the Okinawa campaign, was killed by Japanese artillery fire. He was inspecting a forward position when a shell exploded nearby. Buckner's death was a blow to American morale. He was a respected leader. He had shared the hardships of his men. His death cast a pall over the impending victory. Section 10. Victory at a Cost. June 22, 1945. After 82 days of brutal fighting, organized Japanese resistance on Okinawa finally came to an end on June 22, 1945. The battle had been a costly one for both sides. The Americans and their allies suffered over 75,000 casualties. These included over 12,500 killed in action. The Japanese losses were far greater. Over 110,000 soldiers were killed. Thousands more chose suicide rather than surrender. Section 11. Okinawa's Legacy Shaping the End of the War. The Battle of Okinawa cast a long shadow over the final stages of World War II. This battle, often referred to as the Typhoon of Steel due to its ferocity, was one of the bloodiest in the Pacific theater. It lasted from April to June 1945, involving massive forces from both the Allied and Japanese sides. It provided a chilling preview of the potential horrors of a mainland invasion of Japan. The sheer scale of destruction and the high number of casualties on both sides painted a grim picture of what could happen if the Allies decided to invade the Japanese mainland. The ferocity of the Japanese defense, coupled with the high casualty rates, weighed heavily on American commanders. The Japanese forces employed kamikaze tactics and fought with a tenacity that was both awe-inspiring and terrifying. This unyielding defense led to significant losses for the American forces, making the commanders reconsider their strategies. Okinawa, in many ways, made the decision to use the atomic bombs against Hiroshima and Nagasaki more palatable. The high cost of the battle, in terms of both human lives and resources, pushed American leaders to seek a swift and decisive end to the war. The devastating impact of the atomic bombs was seen as a necessary evil to avoid an even greater catastrophe. The battle served as a stark reminder of the human cost of war. Civilians were caught in the crossfire, suffering immense losses and hardships. The destruction of homes, the loss of loved ones, and the psychological trauma left deep scars on the survivors. It reinforced the need to end the conflict swiftly and decisively. The victory at Okinawa was bittersweet, as it came at a tremendous cost. The reflections of soldiers post-battle highlighted the heavy toll the war had taken on them, both physically and emotionally. The lessons of Okinawa continue to resonate today. Modern-day memorials and visits by veterans serve as poignant reminders of the sacrifices made. These sites are not just historical landmarks, but also places of reflection and learning for future generations. The battle stands as a testament to the human capacity for both courage and cruelty. Stories of bravery and heroism are juxtaposed with accounts of atrocities and suffering. Survivors recount their experiences, ensuring that the memories of those who lived through the battle are not forgotten. It serves as a reminder of the enduring costs of conflict. The war memorials and peace ceremonies in Okinawa are a testament to the resilience of the human spirit and the enduring hope for a world without war. They remind us that while the scars of the past may never fully heal, they can guide us towards a more peaceful future.